Yo guys, what is up? Moxie here with a Dragon Age the Veilguard build guide for my Necrotic Rogue. I've been opting to play as a ranged, kind of bow-focused Necrotic Rogue. It's been incredibly powerful, and today we're going to be going over my early to mid-game guide that should cover everything you need to get really powerful in your first, 20 hours or so of playing. I'll have a separate guide out for, a late game once we get into the specializations, but hope you guys enjoy the build guide. This video is sponsored by EA. Thanks to sponsoring the video and giving me early access to Dragon Age. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get right into it. So let's start with a class and build overview. So the Rogue class at its core gets two melee close range weapons. They can be swords, they can be daggers, and you also get your bow. Now, the bow is kind of what I wanted to focus on, but with this build, we're going to do a little bit of melee attacks, but a lot of range damage. Now, with your bow, right off the bat, anytime you hit an enemy with your bow, you're going to build up momentum. You build up momentum with using your swords as well, and once you have enough momentum, you're able to cast abilities. Now, if you take damage, you're going to lose a bit of momentum, and the more attacks that you're landing, the faster you're landing them, the more momentum you're going to build up. So the goal of this build is to basically have an infinite momentum loop where we're going to be able to constantly spam our abilities while also doing a bunch of damage with our bow. This build really focuses and synergizes with the ability Reign of Decay. Now, Reign of Decay, when you first get it, is a solid ability. It's going to deal AoE damage. It's a control ability, meaning that the enemies that are getting hit by it are going to be getting inflicted with stagger, meaning that they can't really move. And we're going to get some gear pieces and some synergies with this where we'll hit a massive radius with it. The enemies won't be able to move, and by the time the ability's over, we'll be able to instantly cast another one. And then while this is going down, we can just focus on raining down headshots and weak point damage shots with our bow. It's a really, really powerful build, and you can set it up pretty easily, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So now let's do a little bit of a skill tree spec, and respecking in Veilguard is free, so you can do it at any time. Doesn't cost you anything, and I encourage you to mess around with some skills. I just want to show you the path that I went and the skill tree that we ended up with prior to your level 20 specialization, which once again I'll have a separate video on. So to start, we're gonna go to the right from the starting point. This is going to pick us up evasive maneuvers. This basically allows us to shoot an arrow anytime after we dodge. Anytime an enemy comes to attack us, we're going to be dodging and hitting them with an arrow. It feels really, really good. You also can go for the exploding arrow, but I kind of liked the movement and the fast-paced-ness of this ability, so we went with that. Next, we're going to pick up Endure. You lose 35% less momentum when you take damage, which is really nice. We want to be able to build up all of our momentum really quickly. And then we're going to pick up Reign of Decay. This is going to be our main ability and the one that we focus on because it's going to deal a lot of damage for us. Next up, we're going to pick up Salvaged Arrows. This allows us to get +2 arrows after defeating an enemy. This is a huge amount of arrow sustain super early on, so I really enjoy this skill. We are going to kind of overspec it, but I think it's worth to have. Then we're going to pick up Bated Breath so that when we're holding our right trigger, our bow can be charged up an additional level. This is just nice to get extra damage. When we are charging it up, we're going to get more damage on those headshots, so it's nice to have. Next up, we're going to get more damage to barriers, which are kind of shields in this game. We're going to get debilitating shocks, take 15% less damage from enemies who are shocked, and then we're going to go pick up passive. More is better. This gives us more arrow sustain. Then we're going to go pick up this skill. This is a huge pickup for the build. Defeating an enemy by hitting their weak point grants necrotic weapons. Necrotic weapons last 50% longer. Necrotic weapons are going to allow our damage, whenever we're dealing damage, to deal additional necrotic damage, which we are going to be focusing on with this build. And then the other thing that you're going to want to pick up here is the light armor mastery. While wearing a light helm and armor, we're going to get +50 max momentum, 15% more weak point damage, and 20% charge bow damage. If you don't have a light armor that you like yet, you can ignore this until you do, but this is kind of a must-have passive. It's just going to increase our damage a ton. So now we've got necrotic weapons, we've got a big AoE, now we're going to really hone in on making this thing as strong as possible. So there's a few things that we're going to want to pick up. We're going to get mortal wounds for more weak point damage, and then breathing room. This increases the area of our a Reign of Decay, which is really important because we're also going to be picking up Strong Draw, which gives us more charged bow damage, and then also the Underdog's Bite, hitting 3 or more enemies with an area ability grants enhanced damage. This is going to empower us to deal a bunch more damage, so getting the AoE will make it easier for us to proc the Underdog's Bite. Then we're going to pick up Lightning Quiver. This completes our 3 abilities. And note that now we have a projectile ability, we are going to have a area ability, and we're going to have a strike ability. This is really important because even though we are mainly going to be using Reign of Decay, we can actually come to the left here and pick up the Triple Threat. Equipping the ability of each damage type increases ability damage by 25%. We now just buffed up the damage of our Reign of Decay by 25%, which is awesome. Next, we're going to go back over to Reign of Decay and pick up Killer Instinct. This gives us 20% more stagger from the abilities, which is pretty important for a piece of gear that we're going to be using. Then we're also going to be picking up a Breathing Room. This increases the area of our abilities even further, so we've got even more AoE. And then from here, there's a few options. We can go area abilities do 20% more damage. We can go for 20% more damage against armor and crit guarantees on our bow attacks. We can go for the Hunter's Focus to slow down time. I didn't find that overly helpful. Other last 2 points, we can immediately go into the Veil Ranger specialization to start that because we are now level 20. I'm actually holding off on that decision because I do kind of want to mess around with going up and grabbing the Saboteur specialization, which is going to allow us to get Plague Arrow, which when we shoot a charge shot, it's going to immediately apply Necrosis to all of the enemies, and we'll also get the ability that every 5th arrow splinters, and we'll also get a Messy Death that our charged arrow attacks cause enemies to explode after a certain amount of time, and we get more stagger buildup on enemies. So I think I'm going to work my way up there. But with these last 2 points, once again, respecking is totally free, so you can mess around with whatever you like. But we're going to pick up Maximum Momentum plus 50 for more ability spam, and also Heartseeker, which are area abilities, deal 20% bonus damage versus health. And that is our skill tree. Now, for your gear, you can kind of use whatever you want up until you get the mission where the dead must go. Now, you can pick between doing this mission or a other mission. I strongly recommend picking this mission first. Obviously, picking one does not lock you out of the other, but this will unlock the Necropolis for you. The Necropolis is a region that has NPCs that really specialize on necrotic damage. It's where you're going to unlock a lot of the gear that we're using. And just to show you some of that gear, so we've got just a long blade with plus 20% final attack damage. We're going to pick up gain necrotic weapons on kill with final attacks. And while necrotic weapons is active, final attacks apply necrosis. That's going to be really great for us. And then our duelist blade, we've got plus 40 necrotic damage on and apply necrosis whenever you hit with the repose trait. And then once we upgrade this, we're going to get when necrosis expires, deals physical damage to the target, which will be really nice. Now for our main weapon, we're going to be using the Cryptwood bow. All of these things you can pick up just by looting enemies in the Necropolis and also purchasing them from the vendor there. That's why getting to the Necropolis is so important. Then we've got our Cryptwood bow, which deals plus 40 added necrotic damage. We get plus 20 damage versus enemies suffering from necrosis. And then once we upgrade this the next time, we're going to get weak point hits, apply necrosis. Necrosis is a necrotic damage over time, which we're going to get the ability to stack up multiple dots on, which are only further improve our damage. For the helmet, I've just got a light helmet on for the light bonus with 20 defense and 22% ability damage. And then we've also got the light armor of Striking Misfortune. This gives us 50% increased ability damage and plus 15% necrotic damage, which is very, very nice. And then for our gear, we're going to be using the Watcher's Hold. This you also just get from, or all of these pieces of gear, you just get from the Necropolis area. Whenever we use a potion, which we will have plenty of, we apply necrosis to nearby enemies. So we've got guaranteed dot procs on all the enemies around us. We're going to be using the Sightless Skull Amulet, which gives us plus 20 control ability damage, which our Reign of Decay is a control ability. We get plus 25% stagger from control abilities, which Reign of Decay is. And then this is kind of part of the loop, is we gain plus 1 momentum per 50 stagger dealt by control abilities. This is just going to help us build a ton of momentum because that ability staggers like crazy, and we added increased stagger from it, which means enemies aren't going to be able to fight back while that ability is going. For our rings, we've got the Necrotic Jade Ring, which is plus 20 necrosis damage and plus 20% damage versus enemies suffering from necrosis. And we've also got the Precious Decay Ring, which is going to give us plus 15% necrotic damage and plus 25% necrotic resistance. The necrotic resistance here is really helpful because we're going to be using the rune Upend. Upend gives us all of our defensive resistances become offensive damage bonuses of the same type for 10 seconds with plus 5 to all resistances. This gives us, if we hover over our defense, plus 30 necrotic resistance. So whenever we pop our rune, which is up pretty often, we're just going to get another 30% necrotic damage. As you can see, we are very focused on necrotic damage. We're just buffing up Reign of Decay a ton to deal a bunch of damage for us. For your companions, when you're just starting out, Balara is a great option. She has the ability Galvanize Tear, which will suck up all the enemies in an area and drag them all close. And before you get all of your like upgrades to your Reign of Decay, having this as a button that you can click just to group up a bunch of enemies and deal a bunch of damage with Reign of Decay is fantastic. Now that we're later on and we have a bunch of AoE on Reign of Decay, this really isn't needed. You'll just hit everything in the radius anymore. Anyways, the companion that does matter for this is also a companion that you unlock in the Necropolis, and that is Emmerich. Emmerich is a bit of a like necromancer type mage, and we're going to be using a few things on him. One of the most important things you can also just pick up in the Necropolis, and that is the Chittering Signet. This reads that applying Weakened also applies vulnerability to necrotic damage, meaning that if someone is resistant to necrotic damage, we're going to be dealing less damage to them. But if we use his ability, Entangling Spirits is going to apply Weakened, and then we're actually going to get a damage increase against them with our necrotic damage. And we're also going to be applying this like chest piece, so we get plus 10% weakened effectiveness. I haven't unlocked his plus 25% damage versus weakened, but that is going to be really nice. And then we're also going to be using the Bell Tolls. This is kind of a dot focus skill on him, and we're going to go pick up this applies Quietus, which is a dot that is going to, when it is applied to an enemy, give us 5 momentum every second. So we've got even more ability spam with him. And then we're going to pick up more Quietus duration, so we get more momentum. We're going to pick up the Bell Tolls for more damage from Quietus, which is once again a dot. But then our final node in this is Quietus also reduces the target's resistance to necrotic damage by 25%. So we're going to make enemies with just this one NPC. We're going to make them vulnerable to our necrotic damage, and we're going to shred their resistances to our necrotic damage. And that is how we're able to kind of just use necrotic damage as our like kind of one-trick pony skill. Obviously, we do have other damage types. We've got electric on our character, but if something is resistant to necrotic damage, it's not really an issue. And if something isn't resistant to necrotic damage, they are just going to get shredded even harder. For the other ability with him, we're going to be using Time Slow. I don't have him leveled up enough, but while Time Slow is active, we're going to get 25% more damage, and we're going to get 50 momentum whenever it ends. But the big thing is Timeless Suffering. When Time Slow ends, any active afflictions receive an additional stack. So all of our necrosis, our quietus, all those things should basically double stack with this ability, so that we're going to be dealing even more necrotic and even more dot damage. Now, for your other companion, you could kind of go with whoever you want. One thing to note, though, and the reason why I'm kind of decided to go the route that I'm going, is if we go over to Reign of Decay and look at this ability, it has an advanced spec critical condition. Target is chilled, meaning that this ability will crit when an enemy that it's being cast on is chilled. And the only character companion that I've unlocked that can chill enemies is Neve with her Blizzard. Now, if we go down to Blizzard, we can actually see that this critical condition is target is afflicted with necrosis. And so we can kind of proc like double crits with Blizzard. And then if we get all the way her leveled, I don't have her yet, but we can pick up this passive that now Blizzard applies chilled on each hit. And so our targets are going to be dotted with necrosis, which is going to make Blizzard crit, and then Blizzard's going to apply chilled, which is going to make the necrosis and the Reign of Decay crit, which should be a really nice synergy. And then we're going to be pairing that with just like a ton of damage from Emmerich, and that's kind of the party that I'm planning on setting up. For creating your rogue class and getting into Dragon Age, you can pick whatever lineage you want. I went with Elf because I thought it kind of seemed appropriate for the like archer class that we were going to make. For your actual class, obviously, you're going to want to pick Rogue. Rogue comes with 3 specializations. The Duelist, which is all about your, like, two-handed swords, and also is pretty focused on Necrosis. So if you want to pivot to that, you definitely can. The Saboteur is all about traps and also has some pretty cool, like, necrotic skills, but they're more about tools, traps, and explosives. And then lastly, there is the Veil Ranger, which is kind of really your dedicated bow class, which this build will set you up for. It's going to enhance your range damage and give you even more ranged abilities. Once you select your rogue, there's 2 options for backstory that I think are good choices, at least in my opinion. So the Veil Jumpers are going to give you increased rep with the Veil Jumpers. You tune strikes, you deal more increased damage to Fade Touched, but more importantly, you get Keen Eye, which increases your crit and weak point damage. This is what I went with. The other option that would be really good if you want to go that route is the Mournwatch faction. This gives you a reputation with the Mournwatchers more quickly, which is fantastic because, you know, we're going to be using most of the gear from the Mournwatch. So in hindsight, I kind of wish that I had picked this. You get Return to the Grave for increased damage to undead and demons, but more importantly, you get Acute Afflictions, which allows you to apply an additional affliction stack on targets. This is a stat that's pretty hard to get until a bit later on. So if I had to redo my decision, I would probably go with Mournwatch rather than Veil Jumpers, but I saw that crit and weak point damage and decided to go for that. Once you've picked your difficulty, you should be good to go to jump into the game. Guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. When I'm deciding on like a game to get into and I'm looking around for like what to play, a lot of the times I just end up watching build videos on classes, even if I'm not going to play them, just to kind of see what's available and what kind of play styles I can pivot towards. So even if you don't follow this build guide, I hope you found it informative. And if you do, I hope you enjoy. It's a lot of fun. And I've been really enjoying the like necrotic playstyle. It's one of my favorite archetypes in video games, and I plan on expanding it and bringing it all the way into the end game. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Huge thanks to EA for sponsoring this video. Peace.